I know it's 2020, but if you could go back in time, what would you do? You're listening to the Master Your Lens podcast, episode 176.
Hey, John Lee Dumas here, the founder and host of EO Fire, and welcome to the Master Your Lens podcast, the photography podcast dedicated to sharing inspiring stories, technical tips, and powerful secrets to help you become a better photographer. And now, your host, Matthew Jordan Smith.
Hello, Photography Nation. I am feeling so good. The Eddie Adams Workshop is a wrap for 2020. Now, don't get me wrong, it was absolutely amazing in so many ways, but it was also all-consuming. I mean, hours and hours and hours of Zoom meetings, night and day. I felt like it took over my life, but it's over now. It ended for me on Monday, but it ended for everybody else in the States on Sunday night. But people were from all over the world. So for many of us, it ended on Monday afternoon or Monday morning, depending on where you are in the world. This year, instead of 4 days, it was about 2 months of very intense work. Definitely the most intense work I've done this year in terms of being online and doing Zoom meetings, Zoom calls. Don't get me wrong. It was time well spent and time that I will never forget. I met some incredible photographers. I mean, the next generation of photographers, all young, coming up, the future of photography. And I've got to say, I'm glad I was able to be a part of hopefully their future and inspiring them. I think everybody from the workshop is burnt out from Zoom. But I also think, even if they are burnt out, everyone would do it again. Hopefully next year, we'll all be in a different place. In terms of our world, I mean. Hopefully, we'll be able to meet in person. Nobody knows what the future holds. But let's say we're in the same place where we can't meet in person a year from now. Would I do the Eddie Adams Workshop again if it would be exactly the same type of intensity as this year? Well, you heard me say I was burnt out on Zoom. Burnt out because it took so much of my time. Well, here's my answer. Absolutely. You give a lot, but it feels incredible. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about all these young photographers who are at the beginning of their career, wondering how to do stuff, wondering how to get work, wondering about the steps to take. What if that was me? What would I do? Well, I can tell you this right now. I would do exactly what many of those photographers are doing. And that brings about today's conversation. If I could go back in time and talk to my younger self, what advice would I give a 25-year-old Matthew? Before we go into that, I want to ask you that same question. What would you tell yourself? What advice would you give to yourself when you were 18, when you were 20, that could help you right now? Think about that. I've been thinking a lot about that as I've worked with these young photographers, as I've heard their questions, as I've watched their work, heard their process, heard their struggles, their ups and downs. And it's a different age in terms of photography now versus when I was coming up. But here's the crazy thing. Their questions, their struggles, they are the same struggles, the same questions I had when I was coming up. We all know photography has changed a lot. When I started my career, it was film. Today, it's digital. As a matter of fact, speaking of digital, there's new cameras that are coming out today from Nikon, and I am super excited about that. So let me pivot for a second and just talk about the new Nikon Z6 II and the new Nikon Z7 II. And I've got to say, I am super excited to start shooting with these new bodies. I can't wait to get my hands on mine. New bodies, new possibilities. Oh, and by the way, new glass, something I'm super excited about. Anyone who knows me knows that I love super fast glass. And yes, there's new glass coming out. Super happy about that. If you don't know, now you know. New cameras, new lenses, and it comes out today, October 14th, 2020. In just a few hours, the new gear will be available. Today is launch day. I have to thank Nikon for all the advances that they've done in the world of photography. They're always pushing the limits, and for that, I love Nikon. I was doing a shoot yesterday where I shot both video and stills, and I was having a ball doing both. I'm going to admit, in the past, I was a little shy about shooting video. Now, I know a lot of photographers have been shooting video for a while, but I wasn't one of them. And I'll tell you the truth, I didn't shoot video because I really didn't understand frames per second. I totally understand aperture, shutter speed, ISO, but there's something about that little pivot of frames per second that threw me off. And it took me a while to understand it. And because I didn't get it at first, I stayed away from video. Then there's also the other element, sound. Sound's very difficult when it comes to video. But there's new technology out there now to make our lives easier when it comes to video and, of course, when it comes to stills. It took the first generation of the Z6 to get me into video. And for that, I am very thankful for Nikon. Now, the new Z6 II is coming out and the new Z7 II are coming out, and I can't wait to explore even more and go deeper down the rabbit hole in video and, of course, create more beautiful still images. That's what technology does. It helps us get better. But today, we're going to talk about our past. I was wondering, what advice would I give my younger self? Well, there's a lot of advice I would give myself if I could go back in time and say, Matthew, don't do this. But today we're only going to talk about photography. I have two friends who started their careers by going to the Eddie Adams workshop. One I knew about. We were in New York at the time. He's about 10 years younger than me, but I met him after he came from the Eddie Adams workshop. And for him, it was a big deal. He got his first assignment with the New York Times, and that started him on a path that has created an amazing career. I have another friend here in Tokyo who I've known also for a long time, but I did not know that he also went to the Eddie Adams workshop years ago. He's Japanese. We met years ago in New York, but now he's back here in Tokyo, and we hang out quite a bit. So last year this time, we're having lunch, and I told him I was going to the Eddie Adams workshop. And he says to me, oh my God, I started my career by going to the Eddie Adams workshop. I'm like, wow, I never knew that. It is powerful. So maybe you're wondering, what would I tell my younger self if I could go back in time and make some changes? Well, yes, I definitely would have bought stock in Apple, and I would force myself to not touch it after I made the investment. But again, this is not about that. This is about photography. What photo advice would I give myself, my younger self, if I could go back in time? Here it is. I'd tell myself to work and submit your work to the Eddie Adams workshop, and to do it every single year until you got in. You see, it's very competitive. They only take 100 students. from around the world. And those that get in have an amazing advantage that others don't. Now, the important lesson is you don't give up. If you don't get in the first time, you keep trying. That's the lesson. You have access to the best editors in the world. You have access to the best photographers in the world. You have access to the best teachers in the world. You have access to the entire industry, art directors, editors, creators, photographers, producers, techs, all there in one place, and all of them have your attention. They're all looking at your best work. Everybody, and looking for that next person. When do you ever get that opportunity to be in that company and show your best work? But not just show your best work. They work with you to pull out your best work. It's an incredible experience. So if I could go back in time and tell my younger self something that could make a big difference in my career, to put you on the fast track, that would be to submit your work to the Eddie Adams Workshop and spend all my time preparing for that. It's that big of a deal. But let's say you're not young anymore. Let's say you're in your 40s or 50s or more. What can you do now to put yourself on that fast track as well? That would be to enter into every contest that you can. With this in mind, first look and see who are the judges. If they're photographers, it may be fun to enter that contest because there are advantages to having those who look at photography all the time judging your work. However, if your goal is to get more work as a photographer, to break through in places where you can't break through, I want you to look at the judges and look and see who are the editors, who are the curators. These are who you want to judge your work because they have the power to hire you, and they have the power to give you guidance that can make a huge difference in your photo career. Here's the deal. You can't see your work. Let me say that again. You can't see your work. None of us can. It's like looking in the mirror. Every day, most of us look in a mirror, and you've never seen yourself, even though you look in that mirror every day. What you see is a reflection of yourself, not the real you. You see the reflection, and that reflection can fool you. Everyone around you, they see the real you. It's the same in photography. You can't see your work. For whatever reason, we are somewhat blind to that, and you need help to really see your work, to really learn how to see beyond the reflection, to see the real work. That's when an editor comes into play. And that's when entering into great contests can really help you, or getting into something like the Eddie Adams Workshop. I know you're probably tired of me saying that. I've been talking about it quite a bit. But I need to beat this drum even more because it's that big of a deal. If you want to have a career, a real great career, as a photographer, get your work into the Eddie Adams Workshop. You now have a year to prepare. Go beyond just studying photography. Study the process in telling a story with your images. If your goal is to stand out, this is the process. If you're in my private group, we're going down that path. So get ready. If you are not in my private course, stay tuned. We'll be opening up the course very soon for others to join. I know it's been closed for a while, but it's been very, very busy. But that's about to change. And very soon, we'll be opening the course to take in new students. Again, stay tuned. Your time is coming. Before I leave today, I want to leave you with this. It's never too late. Yes, if I could go back in time and talk to myself and give myself advice, I absolutely would. But we can't do that. We all know that. I mean, who wouldn't change the past if we could? But that's a fallacy. The reality is, you have a choice to make today, and your choice decides what your tomorrow is going to be. That said, get out there and vote. Do it now. Don't put it off. Do it now. Get out there and vote for the future you want. And then get to work on your photography and pushing yourself to get better. Find the contests. This is the time of year when a lot of photo contests are beginning. When submissions are open, it's the perfect time for you to start looking at your work and figuring out how many contests you want to enter into over the next year. This is the time. Start looking and start submitting your work. All right, Photography Nation, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Master Your Lens podcast. I'll be back with a lot more next week. Until then, always dream big. Bye for now.